Hi, I'm Gina Shock from the Go-Go's, fabulous drummer of the Go-Go's.
Hi, this is Tony Levin of King Crimson.
Hi, this is David Fishoff of the Rock and Roll Fantasy Camp.
Hi, this is Richard Evans. I am the author of Listening to the Music the Machines Make.
Hi, this is Teresa Kariakis, punk rock photographer.
Hi, I'm Tom Beaujour, author of Nothing But a Good Time, and you are listening to Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
Modern Musicology.
You're listening to Modern Musicology, so, pay attention. You might learn something.
You're listening to the ESO Network, your station for all things geek.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Modern Musicology. This week, we are going to be talking about the year 1978. Our gang is here. Stephanie Seymour.
Hello, people.
Rob Levy.
Sup.
Sup.
Sup. And we are setting the dials on our time machine back to 1978. 1978 is a good year. There's a lot of great stuff going on this year.
Oh, yeah.
So let's just dive right into it. No time to waste. We have a whole bunch of really, really important debuts that happened this year. First albums from really important bands and a couple of releases that are absolute game changers. Ones that just, like, you can see the road ahead is curving, but then all of a sudden there's a sharp left turn or something. And we've got a couple of those. The first one that we have, the earliest one in the year, February 10th, the debut album from Van Halen.
Woot, woot.
Dude, you talk about changing everything.
Everything.
Holy
all in one, basically. Eddie Van Halen's Eruption, kind of one of the greatest guitar solos of all time, really. Popularized the two-handed tapping thing that he did. I mean, it was just, and it sold more than 10 million copies for them. So this is one of their biggest albums. Peaked at number 19 on the Billboard Top 200. And I mean, there's so many great songs from this. Jamie's Crying, Running with the Devil, Ain't Talking About Love, which if you watched early MTV, that was on like every 2 seconds, as was their cover of You Really Got Me by the Kinks. So this was a great one. Oh yeah. Two of my absolute favorite Van Halen songs ever come from the first album. And that is Atomic Punk. Oh yes.
And On Fire. I feel like those two songs, the whole album was like nothing like you'd ever heard before. And it wasn't just Eddie. It was David Lee Roth's delivery. It was his vocals, his sort of like that weird scream that he does. It was
Alex's drum sound.
Oh my gosh. Yes. And, Michael's bass and backing vocals. I mean, this was just like the whole package. But I think that those two songs, Atomic Punk and On Fire, were so different from anything else that had happened before them.
And Eruption.
Oh my gosh. And of course, Eruption. I mean, that goes without saying, because that changed the way every guitar player thought about their instrument.
People
just sat around there and they're like, how did this even, what is he doing? How does he make those sounds?
There is a great Kerrang magazine review that I picked out because it said, it was basically his sound on this album remains the holy grail of guitar tones. That's, that's how much but I also love to find a bad quote about a good album because I think it's so funny at the time.
I love those.
So I found one from Rolling Stone critic Charles Young.
Of course, it's from Rolling Stone.
Of course, right. So he said, in 3 years, Van Halen is going to be fat and self-indulgent and disgusting, following Deep Purple and Led Zeppelin right into the toilet.
What?
Okay, thanks. Gosh. Thanks a lot for that one.
Oh, that's brilliant. Man. And the nice thing about the internet is that all of that stuff lives on. You can find it like that.
It does. It's
You
too
can't
funny.
hide your short-sightedness from decades. It's going to be right there to find.
Yep.
That's so funny. What's your favorite song from it?
I think my favorite is Ain't Talk. I kind of love Running with the Devil maybe a little more than Ain't Talking About Love.
I mean, when you start off the album with that, like the car horn kind of sound, and then it goes to that boom, boom, boom. And then, holy cow, it's just such a great song.
I know.
It just told you this album is going to be different from anything you've heard before.
And you're right about the harmony. Like, just think about that running with the devil. Like, and yeah, it's like, oh.
God, they're so good. I will say, I kind of like Van Halen 2 more, but you can't argue with this first album. I mean, it is one of the best debut albums ever recorded in the rock era.
It is. And, I like you're saying your favorite album might be, or you like Van Halen 2 better. I mean, for me, mine is Diver Down. I know a lot of people aren't crazy about that record, but like, that's just to me, my favorite. But you're right. There's nothing, how can you kind of top for this genre,
Yeah.
So.
And 1 week after Van Halen's debut, we get the first full album from Kate Bush, The Kick Inside.
Kate Bush had a huge 1978, actually. She had an EP and 2 albums out. And that's kind of when the tide shifted, because really when Kate Bush came out, as is the same now, nobody sounds like her. Nobody's really making records like her.
Yeah.
And she completely sort of just changed the rules of female recording artists and how they go about releasing their records. She just simply told the label, these songs are done. I don't want to wait a year. I don't want, I'm an artist that creates. I will think of new music, put them all out. And she was pretty adamant about getting 2 records out. And they're both great. But that first album is just fantastic. It still holds up well.
Yeah, I love that first album. What's your favorite track from it?
I still like the saxophone song. I still like Wuthering Heights is kind of the one everyone's going to
I think Wuthering Heights, yeah.
I still like the saxophone side, but I have to say, as when we were on with, I think, Rob Alsop ages ago, I'm still a big fan of Kite. So
I haven't listened to that in a long time.
Yeah, and I listened to this record about a week ago, and the production on it still is incredible. It doesn't sound dated in any. Some of the records from 1978, they have a little bit of dated production stuff, right? That alluding to the Van Halen record that you talked about before, that record doesn't sound dated either.
No,
right?
It does not.
So I think the albums that have done really well are the ones that aren't necessarily of the time.
Yeah.
But the Kate Bush especially is not of the time, and it's amazing.
I love the title track, Kick Inside. I think that's an amazing song. And the opening track, Moving, I love. There's 2 piano sort of ballads on there, The Man with the Child in His Eyes and Feel It. And oh my gosh, I love both of those songs so much. So moving on a little bit, exactly 1 month after Kate Bush, Generation X.
Yes. You can see I'm chomping at the bit for this one.
Take it away.
Because, all right. So yes, it's their self-titled debut album. By the way, this was produced by Martin Rushent. So I think this is kind of interesting that the bassist, Tony James, wrote most of the lyrics for this, and Billy Idol, who was a singer, actually wrote most of the music for the album. And it was recorded in 1 week, which I think just alone is pretty amazing. And a lot of not a lot, but some of the songs like Youth, Youth, Youth were done in one take only. So to me, this is like, you list the songs from this and it's just like hit after hit in a punk rock way, but it's from the heart, which basically was one of the songs that meant so much to me that I almost got the lyrics "Rock and Roll Made Me Free" tattooed on myself, which I still might do.
Nice.
100 Punks, Ready, Steady, Go, Kleenex, Promises, which like Kleenex is so great, but Promises like a fucking punk rock anthem. Kiss Me Deadly, Day by Day, Youth, 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 and then their cover of Give Me Some Truth by John Lennon was fantastic. So I think this was by far their best album, and sort of everything from after this is sort of downhill. Like they sort of burn brightly on this gem and then just went downhill. And, I want to bring up one thing. One of our listeners brought up a comment on a reel that had Billy Idol on it that our friend Teresa Kariakis, who we interviewed on a previous episode, had made. They were saying that when Billy Idol and Generation X came out with this band, that they weren't really considered a punk band. But I think what that person meant was maybe because, they were more of a sort of a pop rock punk band, and they didn't really get political. They didn't really care about dismissing the music that came before them, like a lot of punk rock bands did. So in that respect, I don't think they were as punk rock as you might consider, like, Susie Sue or Johnny Rotten. But there's still, this is a punk rock record,
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to quiz you.
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot. You're going to have to pick one or the other.
Oh God.
Kiss Me Deadly by Generation X or Kiss Me Deadly by Lita Ford?
There's no question.
I know Lita Ford.
I
totally.
know. But I like Lita Ford, but yeah. Generation X is gonna win in my book any day.
That's hilarious. All right, moving on. June 6th, we have the debut album from The Cars.
Holy smackerel. Another thing, if you just read the song titles, every song I'm gonna just list. Just What I Needed. This is like a greatest hits, but it's not.
It really is.
Just What I Needed. My Best Friend's Girlfriend. Good Times Roll. Don't You Stop. You're all I've got tonight. Bye Bye Love. What the fuck?
I know. It's insane that much stuff came from one album.
Yeah. 6-time platinum.
Yeah.
It's like an instant classic, and it stays. It stayed that way, right? And Rob, this is a good one. I think, to your point, I don't think this sounds very 80s.
No, it doesn't sound
70s. I'm sorry.
It doesn't sound very 70s. I was going to jump
80s.
in and say two quick things. One, this sort of opened the success of this album. I think opened the door to new wave artists getting played on the radio, or at least power pop bands.
Definitely.
Because I just think it's relentless. The other thing too is my 10-year-old brain from in 1978 remembers hearing The Cars on the radio all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
At least at our station here. And they were one of the first bands that I remember just like always hearing on the radio and knowing who they before was always like, oh, it's the songs or whatever, right? It was but literally I could just hear them. I knew who it was like 32 chords
very
in.
distinctive voice. Yeah. And sound.
Oh, yeah.
But yes, of course.
It's just I just knew, right? It wasn't like Chicken of the Month Club or whatever, right? I just knew that this was something new and different.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And it was interesting to me is that how like album rock radio just gravitated toward The Cars, and it doesn't sound like anything else that AOR stations play.
That's a good point.
And the other thing is that there were only 3 singles released from the album: Just What I Needed, My Best Friend's Girl, and Good Times Roll. And yet rock radio took to all these other tracks and just played the hell out of them.
Yeah.
And another one that we didn't mention earlier, Moving in Stereo.
Oh, yes.
Which is one of those that only rock radio ever played,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And God, I love that song.
The other thing, too, is in thinking of 1978, sort of in context, a couple friends I knew that did a lot more radio in 1978 than I did were saying that, in 1978, a lot of commercial radio was looking for the next thing, right? They weren't sure what it was. So you're seeing a lot of stuff by radio getting thrown on the wall and seeing what sticks, right? Because at this time, the saturation of disco has started, right? Where people have kind of you had the huge success of Grease and Saturday Night Fever that year, right? But people are starting to kind of get, okay, I'm tired of disco, but nobody knew what the next thing was. So I think that The Cars and Van Halen got their foot in the door because of the timing, not just the talent, but also the timing. The radio was like so hungry.
Yeah, good new sound.
New.
Yeah.
And I think The Cars in particular really benefited from that because it was so completely different. And they're from Boston, So it's an East Coast band. East Coast radio could just go all over them, right?
Yeah.
It's still just a great, great, great album. And, you know, like you're saying, if you get a Cars Greatest Hits, half the Greatest Hits album is basically this first record. Yeah. It's so good.
Yep.
April 7th, the debut album from Prince. Now, what's interesting here is that the debut album was not a game changer. Prince coming onto the scene was definitely a game changer, but that first album just didn't do much at all. Mm-hmm. And it's a weird album, you know, because it's very keyboardy. And it was basically, not basically, it was him in the studio playing every instrument, writing all the stuff, doing all the background vocals, everything, doing all the mixing, doing all the editing, doing all the production. It was him. Wow. And I mean, he was being pitched to Warner Brothers and they're like, hey, we got this 20-year-old kid. He can do everything. He wants to record an album by himself. And they're like, well, we're not going to pay somebody completely untested, you know, completely just out of their diapers, you know, to go into a studio. So they basically made him audition for them. And he had to record, mix, edit, and fully produce a complete track from scratch. So he laid down a drum track, and then he laid down the bass part, and then he put down the keyboard parts, and then he added some guitar, and then he did his vocals, and then he did background vocals, and then he did the mix. So he did everything, and it took hours to do a song, but they watched him do the entire process, and they're like, okay, we will fund this guy.
Yeah, when you go to Paisley Park, they talk about the making of the first record and how the label was just completely in awe of like the way that he worked, but also the fact that he said, this may not be the record that you remember me for, but be the first one that you've heard that leads to greater things. Yeah. Which is interesting. Even then he knew.
Yeah, and there's some interesting stuff on there. Like the title song For You is basically a 1-minute a cappella piece that's really weird. The only like close to coming a hit was called Soft and Wet, which is just oh my God, I love that song. It's the funniest title, but I love the song. And it's a good album. It's way down on the list of my Prince favorites because, you know, the mountains that he would climb from that point are so staggering that it kind of leaves that first album, you know, in the dust. But I think it's great. I love it. And when you know that he did the whole thing by himself, it's really an impressive feat. So Prince comes on, you know, eventually changes the game.
Yep. But not in 1978.
Nope. And really 79 is where it really starts with I Want to Be Your Lover. But 78, man, he had to get his foot in the door, like Rob was saying.
Yep.
That was April 7th. So we go all the way down to August 28th and Devo. Are We Not Men?
Not men.
We are Devo.
We are Devo. And I remember hearing this for the first time. It was actually the next summer because I heard it in camp because our bunkmate, Jenny Davis's father, was a DJ on New York radio. And so my 12-year-old brain had to process this record or 13-year-old brain. It was like the weirdest thing I had ever heard, I thought. I didn't know I couldn't even process what I was listening to, but I knew it was cool and I knew I liked it.
Yeah. The fact too that like the demo of one of the songs got played for David Bowie and Iggy Pop and Brian Eno and Robert Fripp, and they all were like ready to drop everything and produce them. And
Eno did produce it, but and Bowie sort of like helped when he wasn't busy on the weekends. Yeah. It's true.
My weekend side gig.
Yeah, he was doing a project and that's why he could only come on the weekends. Sure. Isn't that funny? But I don't think they got along with Eno very well. I think that Eno wanted them to be more experimental, and they just had this idea of what they used some of his stuff, but not, you know, I think there was a clashing, and I think that's why Bowie came in to the mix. Yeah. Right.
My first I think this was my first exposure to Devo was when they performed on Saturday Night Live.
Oh.
And I thought, what the hell is this nonsense? And of course, the first thing you hear, I think it was the first of the two songs that they played, or maybe it was the second one, I don't remember, but the Rolling Stones cover.
Satisfaction, yeah.
And you're like, Why did they ruin this rock icon? Why did they destroy this great song? I like it now, but at the time I was like, oh my God, this is hideous.
See, I don't think
hideous.
I know this is sad to say, but at that age, I don't think I really knew the Rolling Stones version that well or at all, maybe. And so hearing this, I don't think I could compare it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I heard this, this is one of the records my brother brought home. And I just had this memory of hearing it. And I'm like, what is this? And little did I know that I would love it, 10 years later. But like this, and he brought home another record from 78, we'll talk about later. It was sort of like there was a lot of weird music coming into my house that I had no idea what it was, that I wish I could go back and tell my 10-year-old self, pay attention to this more. But I just like, man.
That's okay. You can listen to it now and appreciate it.
No, it's just like, wow, my brother does do a lot of drugs.
Okay. Good way to find out.
Well, I asked him about it, and he said, oh, this is drug music. You wouldn't like it.
This is drug music. That's funny. That's what I used to get told about Pink Floyd. Oh, this is drug music. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, I don't do drugs, so I guess I can't listen to them. So that sort of robbed me of years of good Pink Floyd music. All right, so November 2nd, Outlandos d'Amour.
Hells yeah.
Police.
My favorite band.
Your favorite band, yeah.
Yeah, my favorite band. Although, at this time, I didn't know who they were. I don't think I knew really who they were until really like 1980 or 1981, but obviously, in retrospect, love this record so much. And my high school band, I used to cover Next to You and Truth Hits Everybody.
Oh, nice. Yeah. Nice.
But yeah, this was, I love when you research stuff and you find things that you didn't know. This record was recorded for only £1,500, which is maybe like, what, $2,500? And,
yeah.
They borrowed it from Miles, from Stuart Copeland's brother Miles. And
yeah.
Miles, he loved rock. He didn't like a lot of what they were doing at first, but then he heard Roxanne and he loved it. And he took it to A&M, and they agreed to release it as a single only. But since it didn't chart, and they basically gave him another chance with Can't Stand Losing You, and that became their first hit.
£1,500, and they recorded it like piecemeal. Because they I can't remember the name of the studio they went to, but they basically did it when that studio had downtime.
Yeah.
Or if another band was in and their session got canceled, they would call up Sting and they'd be like, hey, come on down. You got to be here in 10 minutes.
Yep.
And they would record a song at a time or a bit of a song at a time. And that's how that album put together. It's crazy.
Yep. And, I also learned something about the song Peanuts, which I love that song.
Yeah.
That was about Rod Stewart, which was Sting's idol. But then he was like, I guess he couldn't stand what Rod Stewart had become, and he wrote that song about Rod Stewart. Although now he sort of disavows that, and he's like, I understand now and have a new appreciation for Rod. That's because he's that.
Exactly.
He became what he cannot stand.
Good old Sting. All right, so there were some other debuts that year. Public Image Limited, Yellow Magic Orchestra. I don't even know who that is.
Yellow Magic Orchestra is Ryuichi Sakamoto's band.
Yep.
And a huge influence on electronic music and hip hop. We talked a little bit about this last time when we were talking about Ryuichi Sakamoto.
Yeah.
But it's very much like basically new wave. It's basically a lot of new wave, sort of synthy, kitschy pop record stuff out of Japan. And it's huge because it influenced this whole cascade of Japanese artists after it, right? Like
yes, it's a huge influence.
Right. But then it also, it affected like David Byrne and David Sylvian and just a lot of folks.
Yeah. We had the first Squeeze album. We had X-Ray Specs.
Oh, hell yeah.
But we got to talk about Susie.
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Got to talk about them Banshees.
The thing is about her debut album is it's a little different than the rest of the records because it's a little more punky and a little less goth, right? Everyone always thinks when they hear the Scream that if they've never really heard it, they're thinking they're going to jump into a goth record. And it has some of that trademarks, but it's got a lot of sort of like her little punk edge thing going on, right? It's also really claustrophobic. Like when you listen to this record, you can just feel this like lingering sense of isolation and being like in a place where you don't have room to breathe. And that I think is really cool about it. Hong Kong Garden is one of the catchiest pop singles ever made. Ever. It's you can't really listen to it now without kind of laughing. Another Beatle. Everybody's doing Beatle covers in 1978. The cover of Helter Skelter is great too. Like the Susie cover of Helter Skelter is great. I like Mirage.
Nicotine Stain.
Nicotine Stain is also really good. Yeah. But in terms of debuts, people didn't really know what to make of Susie, and I don't think because at this time punk was ending and post-punk was taking roots, people didn't really know where any music was going after punk. This is a strong, powerful debut from a female artist, much like Kate Bush, but it's just kind of came out of nowhere, and it's by no means a classic, but it's really good.
Yeah, and I was going to say it's sort of the you could see the potential and what was going to come from them, I think, but it didn't really, it wasn't like, as I was saying before with maybe Generation X, who really had everything in that first album. This wasn't that, but they went on to so much greater things, I think, Susie.
Another comparison, though, I think is that Kate it has a tendency to be a weird vocalist, but I think on that first album, she was a bit more traditionalist. She got weirder as she went along. When you hear Susie, she just has a weird voice. And I think it doesn't fit into a box that well. I think that people just didn't know how to process what they were hearing.
Yeah, and I also think, too, that she just didn't really come from a professional singing background,
right?
Per se.
True.
So I don't think there was the practicing her voice or anything. I think she just kind of went in and did it.
Punk rock, maybe.
Exactly. DIY, baby.
DIY it.
All right. So there was a lot of other stuff happening in 78, though.
So much.
What about some of the other stuff going on? Steph, you want to talk about Billy Joel?
How do you know that was really literally?
I knew that'd be the first thing you'd go to.
No, my list. He's topping it. I mean, okay. Billy Joel, everyone knows I love him, but this album is another one of those things when you're just listing songs and you think it's a greatest hits record. I mean, right? Honesty, of course. Big Shot, My Life, Zanzibar, Rosalinda's Eyes, Half a Mile Away, Until the Night. Good God, there's like a million hits on this album. And it was the first of 4 of his albums to reach number 1 on the Billboard charts, and he won 2 Grammys. This was a cool thing that I found out when I was researching this album. It was the first, either the first or one of the very first commercial releases on CD format in Japan. And then when Sony started manufacturing vinyl again in 2018, it was the first release when they returned to manufacturing vinyl.
Okay, interesting.
So that's a little fun fact about 52nd Street. But yeah, this is, I think, a different sound for him in a way because he was trying to hire various musicians in like the jazz field and just trying to give it a little bit of a different sound from his previous albums.
Yeah.
Million hits on this. Such a great album. Again, this is an album I hear and I think of camp because it was just one, we played it over and over in our camp.
But I think we're in that stretch where every Billy Joel album just becomes like a massive thing. Yeah. And he has such good hits during that period.
He did. He really did. He was on a roll.
Totally.
The Buzzcocks, another Music in a Different Kitchen, the first of their 2 albums that year. The Sex Pistols broke up at the beginning of 78. And the Buzzcocks were sort of like the first kind of punk, borderline, post-punk pop band to kind of come out of the void. It's a really, really interesting record. It's not by any means perfect. Fast Cars is on it, and Fiction Romance, I think, are the 2 that most people remember. but it's great. Also, Kraftwerk's Man Machine came out that year, which along with the Yellow Moon Orchestra kind of changed electronic music, which is huge. And Talking Heads, more songs about building and food. You know, there's a lot of stuff coming out of New York, right?
Blondie.
You got Talking Heads, you've got Ramones, you've got Blondie. You know, you've got just so much stuff coming out.
Yeah.
Of
just the CB scene, really.
Dirty, grimy, ugly New York in the 70s.
Exactly.
Just a sewer of a city, but just like the amount of music and art that's being made in 1978 in New York is probably like outnumbers half of the art being made today.
Right.
You know, in like Fayetteville, Indiana or something. I don't know. But, you know, another great thing that came out in 1978, kind of piggybacking with Devo, was Rock Lobster by the B-52s.
Yeah.
Like, what the hell is that? Right? My brother was really into the B-52s. And I just remember hearing that and then later Planet Claire. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Right?
Yeah, that was somewhat of a Devo experience, right? Like, you're just like, what is this?
Yeah, and my first exposure to them was SNL also. And, and just like Devo, I was like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
Of course, they're one of my absolute favorite bands now. At the time, when I was just a kid in 78, I did not get it. But Rock Lobster, it was a different version, right? Than what they re-recorded it for the first album, which came out in 79. So I've never heard that original recording, that original single.
I don't think they liked it, so I think they buried it.
Not.
Speaking of the CB scene and the whole thing, the Blondie, I mean, this was they were out of it by then, but like Blondie was blowing up with Parallel Lines. If you think about radio, you could not turn on the radio and not hear Blondie, because this album, again, was like a greatest hits for them. This is their third album. It's not their debut or anything, but like Hanging on the Telephone, One Way or Another, Picture This, Heart of Glass, Sunday Girl, Fade Away and Radiate. Like, again, you just could not, you heard Blondie wherever you went.
It is an amazing record.
Yeah.
I think it might be the best Blondie album ever.
Yeah.
You know what's really funny is that the Chrysalis Records people were not so happy about the songs, and the producer, Mike Chapman, had to basically say, you're gonna, and the band too, they were just like, no, this is gonna be huge. And they were totally right.
Right. Well, you know, Chrysalis has sort of a history of making weird decisions, and Pat Benatar comes out next year, 1979, and they're on Chrysalis, and they had all kinds of problems with Chrysalis during the time that they were signed to him. So
Bob did too with his band.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, that's cool. All right, so for my first thing that I want to get into, I've got so many things that I want to do, but I'm going to go with a couple of bands that aren't necessarily linked other than they're hard rock and they're both from England, but their fates are going to become intertwined very, very soon. And in 1978, Rainbow releases the final album with Ronnie James Dio on lead vocals. And later that year, Black Sabbath releases the final album with Ozzy Osbourne on lead vocals. Now, in 2 years' time, Black Sabbath will have absorbed Ronnie James Dio. He will become the new lead vocalist of Black Sabbath, and they put out probably the best Black Sabbath album ever. And likewise, Ozzy then goes off into a solo career and releases a debut album. This is, again, 1980, a debut album that is just a fucking pile driver. It is so, I'm not an Ozzy fan, but that first Ozzy album is so massively good. Oh my God. And a lot of that, of course, you have to say, has to do with Randy Rhoads. What a talent that kid was. Holy smokes. But so it's interesting that Ozzy and Ronnie James Dio, they have this sort of like divergent path. But they sort of like come into this thing where they have these parallels. And it's interesting that in 1978, they're both ending their association with the bands that they're at that time most known for. And then 2 years later, they come together in a different way and release two of the greatest hard rock albums ever made.
Cool. Yeah.
So that's just a crazy kind of little coincidence there.
Yeah. I wanted to mention there a few in a row that I'm not going to go into them really, but this is just to go to the diversity of the era, because there was a lot of huge bands and that had stuff out that you just could not get away from. I mean, I'm talking about like Rod Stewart with Blondes Have More Fun and Do You Think I'm Sexy? Like that was everywhere. Even my father had that record. He played that over and over and over in our living room. I was like, Dad, what the fuck? But
that record literally put the U in ubiquitous.
Totally. But Bruce Springsteen had Darkness on the Edge of Town come out that year with so many great songs on there.
Right.
Badlands, Darkness on the Edge of Town. I mean, geez. Tom Petty was huge with, I Need to Know and Listen to Her Heart. Foreigner's freaking Double Vision was out then. If I never hear that again, that's too many times. But that album was huge.
Yeah, I remember hearing, I remember a specific moment from that year when I heard the song Double Vision. Like I have this memory of walking into a certain building when that song was playing. Like it's a stupid thing to remember, but there it is.
No.
But that song, that album was all over the place.
And also like then in the disco kind of Chic was everywhere with Le Freak and I Want Your Love.
Oh my gosh, yes.
Neil Diamond and Barbra Streisand, You Don't Bring Me Flowers Anymore. So there was so many weird, bizarre things. And like another thing was Andy Gibb with Shadow Dancing.
Yeah.
Mamma mia, that's all you heard.
Oh yeah, that's right.
I don't think you're talking about the elephant in the room though.
Uh-oh, what's that?
Copacabana.
Oh no. Why did we have to bring that up? Oh no. Oh my God.
Because it was everywhere.
That song about bringing flowers is bad enough, but Copacabana, oh my God, I hate that song.
That thing was everywhere.
It literally was.
In the same way that you have, you're traumatized by Double Vision, right? I'm traumatized by just having two sisters and a brother play that thing on repeat.
I mean, I remember going into my refrigerator to get milk, and there was fucking Copacabana right there. I can't even say the word Copacabana. There we go. And I was like, it's every fucking where.
It is.
And
it
then,
was.
Also, you had, disco was still kind of
it was.
Thing. So you had, the Night Fever was still the best hit of the year. But you had, the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack was still scoring well. And you had the beginning of the whole Grease phenomenon, right?
Oh, yes.
But then you've got Rolls Royce and Car Wash, which is just in terms of being a pop record, it's great, right?
Yeah.
And then outside the Donna Summer stuff that year, but the Sylvester that you make, You Make Me Feel Mighty Real record by Sylvester is just amazing.
I still love that record.
I do too.
Oh man, so good.
Yeah.
So, all right. So speaking of disco, I want to get into, and I'm mainly bringing this up because this record label had a box office flop with a movie about it this year. So apparently, Spinning Gold, which was the Casablanca story, played in 700 and something theaters its first week out. Its second week out, it played in 12. I mean, it was that bad of a flop.
Well, it's coming to streaming.
Of course it is, because what else are they going to do?
Well, I mean, the plan for it was to stream, I think, for 3 weeks and then go to streaming. Right?
Yeah, it didn't make it to 3 weeks, though.
Yeah.
Wow, really? But I wonder why. I mean, I didn't see it yet, so I don't know.
It seems like I didn't get to see it because it wasn't playing anywhere in my state by the time I was able to get there. But it just seemed like it was a weird movie. Like it's portraying all these artists that get signed on to Casablanca. And they basically formed Casablanca to give Kiss a record deal. Oh. And Kiss is portrayed very strangely, like the makeup is not right, possibly because Kiss said you can't do our makeup. You have to do something similar. This is
not a documentary. This is like,
right.
Oh, okay. That's weird.
It's a dramatic movie with a really good cast. I mean, there's some surprising people in it. But I want to talk about the year that Casablanca had in 1978 because it is massive.
Yeah.
And there's two stories. One is all the different artists that they have going on. And just a quick rundown. You have a band called Angel, which was sort of, they were sort of marketed as the anti-Kiss. They were a rock band that dressed all in white, and they sort of had an angelic, look about them. And they were sort of like the white version of the dark Kiss, because Kiss was getting all the Satanism accusations thrown at him at the time. And that came out on January 3rd. In February, you had the debut album from the Village People.
Also everywhere that you could not get away from Macho Man, right?
Exactly. In August, you had Donna Summer released Live and More, which was 3 sides of a live album. And then the 4th side was new studio tracks. And that's where MacArthur Park comes from, which was an enormous hit.
Huge.
And Heaven Knows, which was almost as big a hit. You had Parliament, One Nation Under a Groove, one of the greatest funk albums ever released. Second album by the Village People, Cruisin', comes out in September. Midnight Express, the Giorgio Moroder soundtrack. So Giorgio, is working with Donna Summer, of course, and he's now got a movie soundtrack out. And somebody I had completely forgotten about, but when I read the name, I thought, I remember that name, Teri DeSario. Had an album called Pleasure Train. I can't remember a single song or even what her voice sounded like or anything, but I recognize the name. Parliament's next album, Motor Boogie Affair, came out in November. But the big story from Casablanca, and that is what Kiss is doing in 78. Kiss has already done like 6 albums and a live album, 2 live albums in just the course of a few years. So they are just cranking stuff out. So to give them a little bit of a break, April, they released Double Platinum, which was a 4-sided greatest hits album with some like remixed and re-edited versions of like songs from all of their 6 albums. But then the big story is that there was all kinds of stress within the band, and Ace was ready to quit and Peter wasn't happy and blah, blah, blah. So they decided, here's what we're going to do. We're each going to record a solo album. We're going to release them on the same day. We are going to brand them as a Kiss record. We will have matching cover art, but it'll be one guy on each cover in the Kiss makeup. But we'll have the freedom to do whatever we want to do. So 4 solo albums. This is at that point, the only time it had ever happened in history. I don't think it's ever happened again, where each member of a band releases a solo album on the same day. And so Casablanca just has all this. I mean, this is just 1 year for Casablanca Records.
Yeah.
And it's just a massive amount of stuff. And all of it was, except possibly for Teri DeSario, was hugely successful. I mean, they were just rolling in it in 78.
I'm trying to think of being the promotion person to work for Kiss Records at the same time, for solo Kiss Records. That must have been interesting.
Oh, yeah. It was a challenge.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was good stuff. So just in case anybody's interested, here's my ranking of the 4 Kiss albums. Ace Frehley is best. Paul Stanley is a really, really, really close second. Gene Simmons is weird and experimental, but I love it. And Peter Criss is 4th.
That's the nicest
and it's not
thing.
bad. I actually like Peter's. Most people hate Peter's album, but I like it a lot. But it's still the 4th of the 4. So there you go.
Cool. Good rundown, Alan.
The interesting thing, too, about Casablanca, outside of the fact that I forgot about the chase until you brought it up, but even now I can throw that in a DJ set and people love it. That record is just like astounding, right?
Wait, which one?
And the Chase by Giorgio Moroder.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, from Midnight Express.
Yep.
Casablanca was really influential in taking the idea of the same time they got the whole Kiss thing going on. They're making 12-inch singles. For Studio 54, right?
Yes.
Which at the time was like, what is this?
Yeah.
Right? Because I've got a Donna Summer 12-inch from Casablanca with just her on one side, and the other side, they didn't press anything on it.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
then it's got the gatefold is just the same thing. So it's basically 2 copies and then 2 blanks.
Wow.
Interesting.
So they were already thinking of like getting music in clubs. They were really thinking of everything.
But it's interesting too that they form in order. Like Neil Bogart, who started the label, was determined to get Kiss a record deal. He believed in them that much, and he couldn't get him a deal. So he said, "Well, I'm going to start my own fucking label, and I'll give you a deal." So they go from that to becoming the funk and disco label.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Talking about like DIY and then boom, right?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You know, XTC had their first album that year, White Music and Go To, which was not exactly stellar, you know, but in subsequent years, the profound influence of XTC upon everyone, you know, from Matthew Sweet to Amy Mann to like Teenage Fan Club and Tears for Fears, it's everywhere. And then Japan made Adolescent Sex, which is not, upon hindsight, the greatest thing in the world, but that really helped the whole movement of the New Romantics, sort of that whole Blitz Club London thing translating onto albums. You know, Japan and Visage right around this time are starting to make records that are starting to kind of do some things.
Japan also had Obscure Alternatives that year. They had 2 records that year. Yeah. I just want to ask, can we talk about the Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Heart Club?
Oh, we're so talking about that.
Good. Okay.
We are so talking about that.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to do that next, go right ahead.
Okay. Because I was going to say, like, back to my Andy Gibb comment being ever present with Shadow Dancing.
Yeah.
And how huge he was. I thought it was an interesting juxtaposition about how badly the soundtrack for Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the movie, did.
Yeah.
And what a bomb it was, considering the amazing amount of star power on the soundtrack. Bee Gees, Peter Frampton. Yeah. I mean, it was just, I just don't, and George Martin produced it. So it's just crazy what a flop that was. It actually, I read something where it said that they made history as being the first record to return platinum with more than 4 million copies of it taken off store shelves and shipped back to distributors. I mean, that's how bad.
Hilarious. Well, let's put this in perspective.
Yeah.
Peter Frampton had a near fatal car wreck early in 1978. And this fucking soundtrack and movie still did more damage to him than almost dying in a fiery car. You know, I mean, come on. It is so awful.
All the things that cocaine did for Casablanca Records, it did not do for the Sgt. Pepper's Film Project.
That's another good one. I will say, though, I absolutely love Aerosmith's cover of Come Together. And I still love it. I'm going to commit blasphemy here more than the Beatles. I know. It's crazy. But I think that Aerosmith's version is so good.
Well, so
Probably
there wasn't
nobody agrees with
exactly
me,
it wasn't a total disaster then, but it was close. The soundtrack was close to a total disaster. Yeah.
Right.
The Bee Gees basically, this really did them in for a while. I mean, this was like, they were just like tarnished, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, and we talked about this last year when we did our 1977 show.
Yes.
It took a while for Frampton to get going.
Mm-hmm.
He released 4 solo albums that fucking bombed. Yeah. And 76, Frampton Comes out, and it's enormous. It is a mountain range. And then I'm in You comes out, and it's huge. And then this.
So sad.
A near fatal car wreck and a near fatal soundtrack album. So he never recovered from it.
He didn't. And neither did RSO, I guess. Or not RSO. Yeah, no, it was RSO, wasn't it? I can't.
Yeah.
I don't know.
No. Yeah, that was that was a bummer. That was a low point of 1978.
Boy, that's the truth.
You know, The Clash, Give Them Enough Rope, was their second album, but first album in the U.S., right? And that sort of got them American notice. And from there, it took off because, everybody started thinking of, punk music is The Clash, right? Instead of necessarily the Ramones or...
Like Sex Pistols or whatever.
Yeah. it was interesting because it was punk, but it was also like soul and reggae, and so there was so much in there, right? That while not their best record, certainly, it's not the difficult second album.
No,
it's better
definitely
than the first
not.
one, right? You can definitely see an arc, right? But I think it's the one where Strummer's starting to really find his feet.
Yeah, I love that record.
And it's interesting that it took him so long to get here too. But like Tommy Gun, I think was the first thing I heard from that in the English Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
I dated a girl named Julie. I always would play Julie's been working for the drug squad as a test of patience. Yeah, which is why I didn't marry Julie. So yeah.
I would like to point out that on a totally different 180 kind of here, but Elton John had a record out this year called The Single Man. This was kind of the stopping point, I would say, of his, massive 5, 6 album, through the roof success. But also, interestingly enough, it was one of the 2 records that Bernie Taupin was not involved with. So Gary Osborne was the lyricist for this record. He did have a pretty decent hit with Part-Time Love from this album, but you're shaking your head.
I don't even remember hearing that.
You're kidding me.
No.
Oh, that was a pretty big, I thought to me it was, but I also was a huge Elton John fan. So maybe I gravitated towards it when I was like,
maybe, but I just don't remember radio in my area ever playing that.
I could sing it to you right now, but I won't. But
well, I can't, because when I read the title, the first thing I think of is Stevie Wonder. Part-time lover, which isn't the same thing at all.
No.
But so I don't think I even know the song.
You would. I'm
going to listen to it.
Everybody's got a part-time love.
That does sound kind of familiar, but I would never have placed it had you not sung it.
Maybe we won't put that in the episode.
Is that your new single?
Is that your new single, Stephanie?
I'm doing the backup vocals at the same time as anyway.
Right.
Yeah, so that was sort of like the beginning of a little bit of a downward peak downward valley, I should say, in his career.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting because 78, you've got people looking for like the traditional artists that they really, really knew would do stuff, and they're like hurrying them to get records out because they're really trying to get past disco. And then you've got these traditional artists decide to make a quasi-disco record like we talked about with Rod Stewart, right? Which really wasn't a disco record, but it was getting played in all the disco clubs.
It was. I mean, he was definitely trying to go that route, I think, just to be commercial in a way.
Yeah. So it's kind of an interesting time to watch how artists are positioning themselves.
Yeah. Even some girls like the Rolling Stones had that kind of vibe.
Yes. And everything, if they can turn anything into a quasi-disco record and the Stones get a little more dancey, and that's a really good album.
Yeah, that's a great album.
Some Girls is fantastic. But when Kiss's Double Platinum came out, they did a complete new recording of an early song, Strutter, and it has sort of a dancey beat to it.
Yeah.
So anybody is trying to get on that train as the train is already kind of like leaving the station.
It's like derailing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I got a couple of things that I haven't been able to get to yet. And so just super quick, there's Pieces of 8 by Styx. I'm a huge Styx fan. And Pieces of 8 with Renegade and Blue Collar Man. Great, great, great album. It's so good. And those aren't even the best songs on the album. Mm-hmm. David Bowie, his second live album, Stage, is so good. God, I love that album so much. But Who Are You by The Who?
Oh, gosh.
God, that was huge.
Yep.
Here's one this is one that if we ever do a show on one-hit wonders, this is gonna be my top pick. Nicolette Larson. Oh my God, her first album comes out, and she had like 5 albums or something, and I never even knew that. Her first album had that hit, It's Gonna Take a Lot of Love. I still love that song to this day. Mm-hmm. I love it so much. And it's still probably one of my favorite songs from 1978. You could never name another record by Nicolette Larson.
No, sadly.
But
because she had a good voice.
That one hit did really, really well, and nothing after that.
Yeah. We got to name Heart Records, though.
Yeah.
Again, Dog and Butterfly that year.
Yeah.
And was Magazine out?
Magazine was out that year.
Yeah, well, that was that, when they recorded it, they started it in 77 and they got pissed off at their record label, which if you want to know the story behind that, or at least part of the story behind that, you can listen to our episode where we interviewed Michael DeRosier and Steve Fossen from Heart. They tell us all about what a shit show that thing was. They left the label. Epic picked them up and they recorded Little Queen, but the court said, you still owe your record label. We'll let you out of your contract with Mushroom Records, but you still owe them a finished second album. So they had to go back to the studio and finish Magazine, which is their second album / it came out after Little Queen. So now it's their third album.
Crazy.
So it came out at the beginning of 78. And then their fourth album, Dog and Butterfly, came out toward the end of 78.
Yeah, they had a lot of stuff going on.
They had a crazy couple of years, like chaos couple of years.
Yeah. But good songs from Dog and Butterfly, like Straight On, of course, Dog and Butterfly, and Lighter Touch. And Mistral Wind.
Lighter, yeah. Oh, Mistral Wind. So I need to send you the video of my band playing Mistral Wind because we just did it last weekend for the first time.
Yes, and you were telling Steve Fossen and Michael DeRosier that you were going to do that, and they were very excited.
That's right. So I have to send them links to it tonight.
Awesome. Okay.
Yes. But my favorite song on the album is Cook with Fire, the opening track. God, I love that song. And I'm trying to, our band has played it once. It's so hard to get right. It's hard to make it sound good.
Yeah.
So, oh my God. So we're going to keep working on it until, we get it to where we want it. But man, I love that song so much.
I think my favorite on there is Straight On. I love the way it comes in. It's just the beat of the four on the floor. And then she's like, quite some time. Like, it's so great how it just like kicks in.
It's so interesting too, because in the 80s, I saw them every tour they did. And in the 80s, that was the song that they would try to fool you because they would start it a completely different way. It would have a reggae beat or it would have something else, and then it would come to a break and then she would go quite some time. And you're like, oh, okay. So it got to the point where like the third tour in a row, they play some weird, like kind of jammy kind of thing. And I'm like, oh, so this is how they're starting Straight On this year. And it was
funny. That's cool.
But when I saw them in 2016, they did this really cool thing where they're playing Straight On, and I think either they led into it or they did a break and into a James Brown song. Oh, buddy, it was freaking awesome. Freaking awesome.
Cool.
So, yep.
1978 was this will show the complete parallel. Just how bizarre the year was, right?
The parallel lines of 1978.
No, I was trying to avoid that, but no, just the disparity of everything. That's the year that ABBA released "Take a Chance on Me," right, as a single. But it's also the year that Throbbing Gristle released DOA, the third and final report of Throbbing Gristle.
Yeah, that's right.
Which is their second album. It's my favorite of the Throbbing Gristle records. A huge record for industrial music. It would be a huge influence on a guy you might have heard of named Trent Reznor. Just kind of in terms of like the whole noise and industrial movement, it just nothing else sounded like it really, and still does.
Yeah.
And you got to. I like Throbbing Gristle, but man, you got to be in a certain space to listen to it.
That's the truth. That is the truth. And, when you're talking about listening to the songs the Machines make, we have to mention Man Machine by Kraftwerk.
Yeah.
We've talked about a lot of amazing stuff this year, but there's one that was a huge hit everywhere in the world except for America. And I had never heard it ever. I didn't even know it existed until last year when it got featured in a Doctor Who episode. And that is Boney M releases the album Night Flight to Venus with this amazing single, Rah, Rah, Rasputin, Russia's greatest love machine. A song about Rasputin. It's crazy.
later covered by Birmingham, England's I Start Counting.
I don't even know what you're talking about, people.
So there's a band called I Start Counting that's from Birmingham. They were later signed to Mute. But not only did they record that, and what's weirdly how that whole thing gets weird is they would put Doctor Who samples in their records and hide them. So it all comes circular. But yeah.
I don't even know the song or that song, Alan.
No, I don't either.
Boney, I had no idea who Boney M was until the 80s when they were showing up in smash hits and stuff. I'm like, what the hell is this? Right?
I'd heard the name Boney M. I don't think I've ever heard a song until that Doctor Who episode. Yeah. So, Stephanie, we just got to get you watching Doctor Who.
I guess so, because I have not seen one ever.
It is the funnel through which all cultural importance comes to you.
Apparently.
Yeah.
All right. Well, man, 1978 was a fun year, and this was a great discussion. If you people who are listening, if you have stuff that you love from 1978 that we didn't cover, let us know. You can email us at modernmusicology1, the number 1, at gmail.com, or just leave a comment on our Facebook page or wherever you find the episode that you're listening to, and we will talk about it the next time we record. So we are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to be right back with some listener feedback and our picks of the week. So don't go anywhere.
Hey, we're Monkeying Around, a podcast about the monkeys.
Almost 12 years old. Davy Jones was it for me.
I was having problems dancing and tamborining. I got overzealous and overly excited.
Like, we've had our own little version of Monkey Mania 50 years later, which is just crazy.
Be sure to like and subscribe to us on your favorite podcast platform. Check us out on Twitter, Facebook, and monkeyingaround.com.
All right, we are back, and we got a lot of great feedback from from our most recent episode, 2 or 3 hit wonders. And there's one that I want to highlight. This is from, and I apologize that I don't know how to pronounce the last name, Eric. I don't even know how to pronounce it. I'm not even going to make a guess because I'll say it wrong and then I'll feel stupid and embarrassed. But he mentioned a number of ones that at least one got mentioned in the episode, but the other ones I don't think did. Ice House, which that I would never have thought to put that on my list had I been in the episode. But I loved the first single that I heard by them was the song Ice House.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it so much.
We forgot that.
Information Society.
Oh, yeah.
Escape Club.
I think I mentioned them.
You might have, yeah.
Escape Club, though, I don't know of any song other than one.
Well,
I would never
some
have
of
thought
these
to put them on
songs,
a 2 to 3 hit because I don't think they had more.
Some of these, that's one of the things we were talking about. Like some of them, even though they had 2 hits or 3 hits, you only really did remember one, you know?
Right. And then he mentioned Sheila E., which I know you guys did mention quickly in the episode.
Yeah.
But, and she's an interesting case because when you're talking, first of all, like you say, you have to define the criteria that you're using for hit, which for me is it enters the top 40 of the Billboard Hot 100 chart.
Okay.
But if you look at different charts, so we talked about, and he mentions Aha also, which was massive everywhere in the world except America. America, they had 2 hits, 2 songs in the top 40.
I think we talked about that.
But Sheila E., even if you're limiting it to one area, you have to talk about more than one chart because on the Hot 100, Sheila E. is a 3-hit wonder. So she totally counts in as far as our discussion goes. But if you use the U.S. Hot R&B chart, she had quite a few more hits than that. She had songs that never really made it at all on the Hot 100 that were in the top 10 or top 5 on the R&B chart. And her third of the 3 top 40 hits on the Hot 100, Bella St. Mark, did diddly squat on the R&B chart. So she's an interesting one to look at because she has a completely different success record on both of those 2 charts and not even with the same songs. Yeah. So it's really cool because she has Cuckoo and from her third album, Cuckoo and Hold Me, which were both like top 5 singles on the R&B chart, didn't do squat on the Hot 100. So it's really interesting to look at. So anyway, thanks, Eric, for giving us that feedback and all the other folks who commented. We really appreciate it. So let's go to our picks of the week. Rob, what's been spinning in your head?
Mucus.
Aside from that.
Poor Rob.
So spinning around in my head, couple things. There's a new solo record coming from Jessica Weiss from this band called Fear of Men. But she has a single. It's her solo album, but she's billing herself as New German Cinema. It's called Being Dead. If you're a fan of like Mazzy Star or Beach House, that's kind of in your wheelhouse. So look for that. Also, Leigh Neal, Star Eater's Delight. She's from Virginia. She grew up on a farm. Steph, this is right in your wheelhouse, man. It's so great.
Oh, cool. Okay.
She makes amazing records. Leigh Neal, yeah. And then a really catchy pop band that has made records so friggin' catchy that it's painful, right? They're called Royal Otis, and they have an album called Sofa Kings. And they're just very slowly building a thing. And then a band called East, I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's IST, so it's some kind of German thing I don't, but I think it's East. Their album is called Protagonist. It came out in March. They're from Manchester, kind of like the Idols or another band that came out in 1978, Gang of Four. Sort of post-punk thing, which is really, really good. And then also I want to recommend a documentary that was on Showtime recently that I watched during the free 2 days or whatever they gave you of Showtime. It's a documentary called Sisters with Transistors, which was narrated by Laurie Anderson, and it talks about the role that females played in the development of electronic music, and it's amazing. It's absolutely amazing.
I heard great things about that.
As someone who's a really serious Delia Derbyshire nerd, this whole thing was like incredibly amazing for me. So I do recommend that.
Awesome. Well, the only new thing that I've listened to this week is, and this was something that I was waiting for and really excited about, and that's the new Susanna Hoffs record. The Deep End, which is yet another covers album from her. And I just don't get into covers. I mean, I like good covers, but I don't like, I just get, when artists do nothing but covers albums, I just kind of get tired of it. And the first single came out a few weeks ago, Under My Thumb, the Rolling Stones cover, and I just did not like it. Just don't like it. So I was kind of going into the new album with that as my first impression. And it's okay. I mean, it's
the whole thing. You mean?
It just, it's fine. It just doesn't really, and I'm so disappointed that I don't love it. You know?
Yeah.
It's weird. She dropped her album and her book on the same day,
and her new novel.
I do want to get that book. Yeah.
Yes. So I have high hopes for the new novel, which I can't remember the name of, but if you search Susanna Hoffs on Amazon, both of these two new things will come up.
Yeah.
So. Anyway, so that's been my thing, and I just, it's all right.
And I passed this week. I've been listening to nothing. Sorry.
No, it's all right. You've been busy.
I've been a little busy.
It's okay. All right. So next week we will be back. We are going to be talking about the 27 Club, and everybody knows what that is. A cheery topic. Right. Exactly. Everybody knows what that is. That is all these artists that died at age 27. And there are some obvious ones that everyone knows, and that's Hendrix and Joplin and Kurt Cobain and, people like that. But there's a lot of other people, too, that all died at age 27. So we're going to dive into that, and I'm looking forward to the morbidity of that discussion. So until next week, Stephanie, where can folks find more of you?
Well, you can find me on Facebook at Stephanie Seymour Music. You can find me on Instagram at there_r_birds. You can find me on my website at therearebirds.com, and Bandcamp under just my name, Stephanie Seymour, and then on all the streaming platforms like Spotify and stuff like that.
Robert.
So you can find me on KDHX every Wednesday night from 7 to 9 with Juxtaposition. You can stream it. If you miss the show, it's okay because it's streaming on the archive. So you can do whatever you're doing. You can take your llama to the mall, then come home, and you can do what you got to do. KDHX.org. It's on 7 to 9 Central. It is what my sister eloquently refers to as Fright Rock. So you can listen to that. Also, on Mondays, 6 to 8 Greenwich Mean Time, 1 to 3 Eastern, 12 to 2 Central, is Antics on Louder Than War Radio, which is my streaming online show on the Louder Than War radio network. And that's also archived on Mixcloud, and you can listen to the first 6 shows. Much like the 70s, when all these shows came out and they said a Quinn Martin production, the first 4 we like to bill a Bob Perry production, kind of like the Quinn Martin type of thing. So I was, yeah. And then also you can find me on the Weekend Justice podcast with needcoffee.com.
All right. And I've got a little website called cosmiccreative.com, KOZMIC creative.com. And I've got books that you can purchase, which you should if you're a Doctor Who fan. I've got podcasts that I have links to all of those things. So go check it out. And we will be back next week with our buddy Anthony. I think that all 4 of us are going to be around next week, so I'm excited about that. We'll be talking about the 27 Club. Until then, have a great week. Take care. Be good. And we'll see you next time. Keep rocking on.
On.
Exactly. Sunday. Any last song we want to sing to get in?
She drives me crazy. No.
Like last week. Never say goodbye. Say ciao.
All right. Bye, everybody.
This has been a broadcast of the ESO Network. Be part of the crew and help support our shows by donating to our ESO Patreon or by shopping at the TeePublic store, which can all be found at www.esonetwork.com. The ESO Network, your station for all things geek.